Today, we're going to talk about the art of maybe. Why removing yes and no from your Chinese vocabulary changes everything. When we examine the importance of face, or 面子, in China's face-driven culture, we discover that it permeates all Guanxi dependent networks, but most of us interpret these superficial niceties as a disingenuous way of communicating, rather than a purpose-driven necessity that can be incorporated into any winning China strategy. It's well known that our Western direct communication style may unintentionally offend our Chinese counterparts, whereas direct transparency is most often preferred in corporate America. And this contrast is where the rubber meets the road in China. An outside observer might wonder why these charades are necessary, but seasoned China veterans know the long-term benefits of these rituals for both relationships and the outcomes they seek. For both casual and serious Chinese language learners, we can upgrade our cross-cultural communication toolkit by examining different ways to say no and alternative ways to disagree. So begin by asking yourself, do you celebrate your direct communication style because it's worked for you in the past? Or will you adjust your approach because the when in Rome mantra applies to your journey into China? Are you ready to attempt an alternative way of communicating because you accept that a mindset shift is the surest path to true immersion into Chinese culture? Since you are here, let's explore how we express disagreement in Mandarin Chinese when in China. The simplest substitute for saying no is maybe. You've probably been on the other side of a maybe response when you've asked your Chinese counterpart a direct yes or no question, leaving you frustrated at not getting a direct answer. What you probably missed is, in the lexicon of spoken Chinese, the maybe you heard already tells you everything you need to know and can expect moving forward. And this happens to be the first mindset adjustment in the Pragmatic Face Checklist of their thinking. It's on page 8 of a free download you can get by clicking the link. Here, we begin practicing being intentionally vague. But today, we're going to role play some common Chinese conversations. I've deconstructed 6 phrases that will bring intentional vagueness into focus, not as something to memorize, but as exercises to elevate your China game. Each phrase is a Mandarin Chinese alternative for our direct Western responses. Study these phrases, learn the cultural context, and practice speaking them purposefully and then naturally. Are you ready? 你准备好了吗? All right. So the first phrase is 也许. 也许. It translates into perhaps or maybe. So the situation might be your Chinese partner is pushing for a commitment to something that you don't think is viable. The details are fuzzy at best and you have serious concerns. Now, let's analyze our Western instincts and how we are likely to want to respond. All right, so the most direct is obviously we would just say no. We couldn't possibly agree to that. The softer version is, well, probably not, because this would be impossible to get approved. And of course, there's always a softer version of this, which is, I'm not quite sure this is the right direction. Can you walk me through the details? Now notice all the negative words that were spoken, even in the softest language that reflect your emotional and psychological resistance. No, we couldn't possibly agree. Well, probably not, because this would be impossible. to get approved. Even the softest response began with, I'm not sure this is the right direction. So now let's analyze how your Chinese counterpart might respond in Mandarin. Okay, he or she might say, 也许我们可以找到一个好的解决方案. All right, let me say that again. 也许我们可以找到一个好的解决方案. It translates into perhaps we can discover a good solution and find a better way forward. In this response, 也许 is a pivot phrase that keeps the conversation moving in a positive direction without making any commitments. It signals goodwill. It protects your counterpart's face, and it leaves your position open. And notice that there are only positive words in the Chinese response. 也许我们可以 is we can. 找到一个好的 a good 解决方案 solution to the request or the problem. The Chinese response is a non-answer that exemplifies the vagueness communication style preferred by your counterparts in China. Literally, you are speaking without saying anything, but you are conveying that more negotiations are needed before anything can proceed. So, is the psychology of positive and negative words beginning to make sense? Ready for the next example? All right, here we go. 可能不太方便. 可能不太方便. It might not be very convenient. So a situation might be your counterpart in China makes an unreasonable request that you feel is unethical, but a flat refusal might cause friction and embarrass the person who suggested it. Again, let's analyze how our Western instincts might respond. So the most direct way is just no. I'm against working this way, and we have policies against this type of behavior. A softer version might be, we wouldn't be able to do that. Can you try coming up with something else? And then some people who want to be a little bit more gentle might say, I'm not sure we can accommodate your suggestion because it might violate our corporate policies. Now, let's look again at all the negative words that were used, even in the softest language, because it reflects our subconscious, emotional, and psychological resistance. No, I am against working this way. We have policies against this type of behavior. We wouldn't be able to do that. I'm not sure we can accommodate your suggestion because it might violate our corporate policies. Now, let's see how your Chinese counterpart would respond to the same type of situation. 这个条件可能不太方便. 这个条件可能不太方便. This request or condition might be a little inconvenient. In this response, nothing gets rejected and it is nothing personal. The relationship isn't strained while the boundaries are subtly being established. Instead of saying no or rejecting the ask outright, suggesting something as inconvenient, 不太方便, is always more palatable and face-giving. Next is 让我考虑一下. 让我考虑一下. Let me think about it. Okay, similar to the prior example, your counterpart in China asked for more than you can agree to, and flat rejection might cause a loss of face. And again, here are some typical Western responses that you might think are natural. The direct is, of course, no, that is way out of our budget. Softer version might be, I can't agree to that right now. I need to run it by my team first. And a softest version might be, this might not be doable, but let's see if we can meet somewhere in the middle. Again, notice all the negative words, no, can't, and not. Now, what would your Chinese counterpart say? He or she might say, 这个方案很有意思，让我考虑一下。这个方案很有意思，让我考虑一下。It translates into, this proposal is very interesting. Let me think about it. So while the softest example in English isn't bad, the Mandarin example opens up with a compliment. 这个方案很有意思. It acts like praise while serving as a buffer. It creates space in the negotiations and lessens possible tensions. Because during this pause, you have an opportunity to pivot to something else that you might find more valuable. And tactically, it is advantageous to explore multiple factors simultaneously while maintaining positive momentum to ultimately secure a win-win. This Chinese practice is a page straight out of the Art of War playbook. All right, next is 我尽量 I'll do my best. So the situation is you've been asked to do something that makes you uncomfortable and you're not confident that you can actually deliver what they're asking. All right, so this is probably the easiest phrase to master, and you'll also find the most opportunities to use this phrase. 我尽量 I'll do my best. But first, how might a Westerner normally respond when asked to do something uncomfortable? The direct response would be, no, I'm sorry, but this isn't something I can deliver. Softer version might be, I can't promise anything. There are too many variables I don't control yet, or I don't understand. The softest might be, well, I don't think I can, but I'll check, and let's see what happens. And again, notice all the subconscious negative words. No, sorry, isn't, can't, don't. Now, what might your Chinese counterpart say instead? He would say, 我尽量在下周以前给你回复。我尽量在下周以前给你回复。It translates into, I'll do my best to get back to you before next week. 我尽量 sets the tone that you will do your utmost to consider the request. It isn't deceitful, even if you already know the answer is no. In Chinese culture, your counterpart will fully understand your dilemma. You aren't setting false expectations. You are communicating in a style that your counterparts in China will appreciate, allowing Guanxi to continue deepening. 下周以前 translates as before next week, which is literally what you would commit to. I'll give you an answer before next week. 下周以前. But in practice, it means indefinitely. And your counterpart in China will also know it means indefinitely. All right, the next one is 这个嘛. 这个嘛. It translates kind of into, well, about this. The situation is it's a very sensitive topic or request. And it was kind of raised in a group setting, maybe pricing information, exclusivity, or something about a competitor's inside information. And if you divulge it, it would be either ethically or morally wrong. So you're in a difficult situation. So this is probably the most difficult phrase to translate because we Westerners don't really think like this. And we don't have this idiosyncrasy in Western culture. But so let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have this idiosyncrasy in Western culture. 这个嘛. And I'm going to try to translate it, and then you can leave me in the comments whether there's something more equivalent that we would say in English. All right. So how we would respond is, of course, directly we would just say, no, we couldn't possibly do that. Softer version might be, that's a fair question, but let me give you a straight answer on where we stand. This is against our corporate policy. And a softer version might be, well, I don't think we can, but let me check anyways. Again, you'll notice all the subconscious negative words that are reflected in what you say. No, couldn't, against, and even don't. All right? Now in Mandarin, this is how a Chinese person might respond. 这个嘛，情况比较复杂，我们需要再研究一下。All right, so we start with 这个嘛，情况比较复杂，我们需要再研究一下。Well, this situation is a little bit complicated. Let's explore or analyze it more deeply. 这个嘛 is a deliberate pause, not a hesitation, that signals that you are respectfully giving the request serious consideration. Complexity, used in this term or used in this context, 复杂, expresses that this is a little complicated. And it is a face-saving deflection when you say 这个东西有一点复杂. It's a little bit complicated. Now, learn and practice the cultural tactics behind this phrase when your answer is no, but you want to offer a face-saving off-ramp, which should always be your priority in China. Now to the last phrase. 再说吧. 再说吧. Let's discuss it later. All right, similar situation, someone raises a politically charged topic prematurely. It might cause division on continuing the discussion, might cause embarrassment, and it might derail your wider agenda. Now, it's important to recognize that most questions we have for Chinese people fall in this category, where they don't want to answer it, so they might have to say 再说吧. Let's discuss it later. All right, so now let's see how we'd answer and compare it to how they might respond, they being our counterparts in China. So we believe there is value when everyone puts their cards on the table. We value open debate as a means of reconciling differences, and we call it alignment. We believe alignment is best reached by forming, storming, norming, and performing. We believe it's just business, nothing personal. But in China, everything is personal. Alignment is based on the continuous exchange of goodwill, also known as Guanxi. So in Mandarin Chinese, one might say, 这个问题比较敏感，我们以后再说吧。这个问题比较敏感，我们以后再说吧。This issue is rather sensitive. Let's talk about it later. This might be one of the most misunderstood Chinese colloquial expressions. 口头禅. Literally, it translates into let's discuss it later. 以后再说 or 再说吧. Culturally, it means let's avoid bringing up this topic ever again. The person saying 再说吧 is indicating that he or she doesn't ever want to talk about this issue or address this issue. So the 再说吧 would properly translate into please don't bring this issue up again. Most Westerners will need to practice intentional vagueness because it doesn't happen naturally. The instinct, or our instinct, is to clarify, to confirm, and to close the discussions, not leave it open. And this is deeply wired in how we communicate, especially communicate professionally. But in China, these instincts usually will work against our better interests. You can think of these phrases as precision instruments, not workarounds. Each one gives you control over the mood of the conversation, cooling tensions, buying time, or declining without hurting someone's feelings. China veterans who build profitable relationships and get things done aren't the ones who found a way around being direct. They're the ones who've mastered the art of being intentionally vague. Are you ready to go deeper? These practice phrases are just the beginning. If you're serious about communicating more effectively in China, the mindset shift behind these words matters as much as the words themselves. On my website, I've created a free 23-page PDF guide that breaks down Chinese thinking, 中国人的想法, and how its face-driven culture, Guanxi, and Chinese superstitions work together to explain their behavior and how best to cooperate with it. All right, leave me a comment and see you in the next video.